Okay, so Be'ezras Hashem, we are continuing with our shiur on Rav Tzadok and imagination, and we're leaning deeper into the Sefer Machshavas Charutz. It's really hard to contain my excitement over this Sefer, because the clarity with which Rav Tzadok is explaining the very simple dynamics of what it means to be a human being is actually a life-changing thing. It's giving contours to the shape of experience and showing us that everything that we go through as human beings and the battlefield that we all encounter is in truth explicitly found within the deepest sources of Torah. The battles we go through and the processes we go through are not symptoms of a life that have gone the wrong way, but rather they're the very territory in which we cultivate that life that's being lived in the right way. The descent down into the shifts and the changes and the thoughts and the imaginations and the grappling with the body. This doesn't mean that we've fallen away from the script. It means that we're within the script itself. And Rav Tzadok, the Kohen who gives us light, who gives us the ability to believe in Tahara, in the Tahara of the Medame, he's leading us step by step into the dynamics of the self, and he's giving us the receipts along the way. I just saw from Rav Meyer Shlita that in discussing the Ishbitzer and the light of the Ishbitzer and how the Ishbitzer has a unique ability to speak to neshamos that find themselves stuck within this worldliness, where they've lost the script of their narrative, that the light of the Ishbitzer's Torah has the ability to restore our souls, to give us a sense of divine foreknowledge, of yediyah, and to understand that Hashem is with us no matter where we are. And for that reason, the Torah has the ability of awakening souls that find themselves stuck. Because if I'm only operating according to the outside of the world and I judge myself and my volitional behaviors, more often than not, I'm going to be stuck. But when I'm aware of the fact that ultimately HaKadosh Baruch Hu is running the show, that light of the future that shines forth in the present moment, it has the ability to elevate and illuminate all darkness. The Rebbe says it's also true for Rabbi Nachman. The Rabbi Nachman's Torah and the Ishbiter's Torah both have the unique ability of speaking to that place of the neshamos that feel stuck. And we know what the Rebbe has also said about the Rav Tzadok, that the Torah of Rabbi Nachman was so potent that it couldn't be fully revealed in the world. And even though Rabbi Nachman, through Rabbi Nassan, revealed everything, the final mark, the final hammer hit of the Torah of Rabbi Nachman is in fact the Torah of Rav Tzadok. And now it makes sense because both Rabbi Nachman and the Ishbitzer are drawing a light of the future to illuminate the contours of human experience, to teach us that we're not stuck in secondary symptomatic scripts that have gone off script, but rather we're encountering life exactly as HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to be encountering it. And the work that we're doing is exactly the work that we need to be doing. And that wherever we are is exactly where the work needs to be done. And it's here that we're going to go deeper into Machshavas Charutz, into Ostalid, where we go deeper into the nature of the imagination. And so after describing to us the topology of the mind, that there's the chachma in the mind, which is the place of the neshama, which is the true place of being a human being, which is the ability to cultivate meaningful thought processes, which shine forth first through chachma and then through the lens of our own most individualized hearts. And the thing that we're meant to be thinking about is emunah, to choose to live with the ultimate knowledge that we don't know. And within that not knowing, to choose to sacrifice our logic and to leap into faith. That is the main way in which a human being is a person. And we have this ability because of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. We have this pre-existing condition of the ability of tapping into meaningful faith, specifically in the place where the intellect loses its capacity to give clarified facts. The casing of thought, the external lavush of thinking, is imagination. That's the element of the koach habahami. The fact that we're natural creatures, the fact that we have associative thinking, the fact that we want to develop attachments that are based on expectations of reward and preconceived notions. All of these ruminations are rooted in the imaginative faculty. The imagination that this will bring about that, or this will make me feel this, or that will provide me with this feeling. And that imagination, when it descends down to its natural tendencies in the body, it becomes a destructive vehicle because that's where a person imagines that they're going to wrestle perfection or wholeness from this world. And that's where the roots of addiction come from. Addictive thinking is rooted in this stabilized imagination that this thing, this behavior is going to be what perfects me or what makes me feel okay in this world. And so as long as medame, the koyach Dimyon, descends down to the body, That's the place where it's treacherous. That's where we get stuck in all of the different tirdos of this world, of anxiety, of concern over monetary stability, of concern over social standing, concern over politics, concern over all of the external natures of this worldliness, is only when the medama, the imagination, attaches itself to that which is physicalized. And if it's physicalized, it's rooted in the changes of temptation and anger and jealousy, and that's where we lose ourselves. And for a long time, we've said, oh, look, imagination is dangerous, it's destructive, stay away from it. But comes along the Kohen Gadol to reveal to us that no, imagination is not dangerous in and of itself. Imagination is only dangerous in a lazy mind. When the mind allows itself to descend down to the lowest common denominator of the self, which are the physicalized, imagined fantasies, the fantasies of sexuality, of pleasure, of whatever it is that we feel is going to bring us a sense of well-being in this world. And that's where it gets sedimented into an addictive orientation. That's the negative symptoms of imagination. But imagination is not negative. Imagination, in truth, is simply a vessel that needs to be directed to the right place. And if we can remove our imagination from the physical body and the fantasies of pleasure and perfection in this world, and we can elevate it back up to the place of chachmas ha'emuna, the wisdom of faith and the faith of wisdom, which allows us to live through our imperfection as a creature who's always trying to uncover more and more light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but never reaching the full apex of Hashem's revelation. In that place, imagination becomes the vessel that frames thinking. It brings up all of our halomos and our imaginings and our associations, and it brings it into a place of Torah and Emunah, where a person can now imagine themselves as if they're face to face with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They can imagine themselves as living in a space that's populated with the Sheva Roim of Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Moshe, Aaron, David, and Shlomo, and Yosef. That imagination enables a person to enter into a place of Ruach HaKodesh, of Nevuah itself, where I can imagine myself as being a creature of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that in spite of the fact that my body and physical reality tell me that this world is a thickened thing and that it's rooted in physicality, I can imagine my way out of that, and I can abstract my physicalized attachments and I can bring them back up to a place of spirituality. And in that place, not only is imagination not destructive, but imagination serves as the engine that reveals more and more novelty, more and more illumination. So our job is to detach our imagination from the physicalized fantasies of this world and elevate it back up to the spiritualized center of meaning making, where we can allow imagination to enable each and every one of us to develop our own most position of faith rooted within Kedusha and Tahara. And in that place, we become the authors and the narrators of our lives. What can be more redemptive and more redeeming than this mindset? That every day upon awakening, I have an entirely new download available to me, and it's my responsibility through the refinement of my koach hamedame to uncover the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in those places, to see the hints and the signs and the light of infinitude that's resting within all of these images. That's our avodah. And so Rav Tzadok says, when does this happen? If we have to protect ourselves so deeply against the tendency of imagination to descend down into its natural laziness, and we have to fight to abstract it and elevate it back up to become the levush, the garment that reveals holiness. When is this mesugal? When is the time that a person should spend their focus on trying to redeem their imagination? And surprise, surprise, Rav Tzadok HaKohen Melublin teaches us that that's going to be in the time of Adar. Adar, the month of Adar, the time where Purim begins to awaken. And this is where we're going to see that for Rav Tzadok, so much of the discussion about imagination is going to be centered around Purim. And Machshavas Charetz is not a book about Purim. It's a book about the refinement of the imagination to become a vehicle that reveals more and more potency of thought. So why is Rav Tzadok coming into a place of Purim immediately? Because the truth of the matter is that Purim is far more than just a specific calendaric date. Purim is not a celebration of a moment in history where we celebrate the fact that we were redeemed from certain death by way of a topsy-turvy hidden way, but rather Purim represents a certain quality of existence that is true at every single second. Every single moment has an element of Purim. Every hour has Purim. Every day has Purim. Every month has Purim. Every year has Purim. Purim is forever. And the revelation of Purim is that in the future, when all of the other calendaric dates and the revelatory stages that were revealed in exile, when they're undone because the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to be revealed, and all of the lights that we felt are going to pale in comparison to that light, there's one thing that's going to remain, and that's the light of Purim. That Megillas Esther is never going to be mevutal. And if Purim is the one thing that's always going to remain, then on a certain level, what that's revealing retroactively is that Purim was in truth the only thing that ever existed. Because when everything is reduced, what remains is the irreducible kernel of light. And if the irreducible kernel of light that remains after all is said and done is the light of Purim, so then that reveals to us something about the nature of reality as it is in front of us right now. That there's an element of the light of Purim that saturates each and every moment. And what's the light of Purim? The light of Purim is Ad Lo Yada. The light of Purim is where we leave our conscious mind, where we stop trying to intellectualize reality in order to save ourselves, in order to stabilize ourselves. Because we come to realize that according to the external intellectual system, then there's enemies that want to destroy Klal Yisrael, and there's territories of darkness where it feels that we're completely and utterly hopeless. But in the celebration of Purim, we come to understand that it's only when we relinquish control on reality by way of the intellect and lean into the murky and flowing territory of the imagination in its refinement, that that's where the Yeshua is going to come from. The salvation comes specifically through not knowing, through ad de lo yada. And on Purim, what is happening is that the intellect shuts down because we're so profoundly confident that the imaginative drives and the healthy narrative structures that we compose within our own minds when we abstract imagination away from the body, that from within that place of Eino Milvado, we're perpetually revealing the light of Hashem. So Purim reveals the potency of imagination, how even when the Seichel is gone, Nishmas Yisrael is fundamentally refined in our chalomos, in our dimyonos, in our intoxication, in our unconsciousness, in the emergence of these kind of fantastical desires that are rooted not in the physicalized territory of the flesh, but rather in the refinement of the mind. And the moichin, the consciousness of Purim, the moichin of Ad Lo Yada, Keser Elyon Olav Nikra, Reisha de Lois Yada, the ascendant places of faith, which is rooted in a relinquishment on the control of knowledge, that's what's being secreted and being revealed each and every day when we access that point of Purim within our minds. So it's no surprise that when we come talking about imagination and the need to transform that which appears to be darkened and rooted in the body and its addictive drives, and in truth has the capacity of being transformed into a vessel that reveals more and more light, so then obviously we're going to encounter the light of Purim. And so Tzadok explains as follows. He says, it seems to him that the main way to refine imagination is going to be in the time of Adar. Why in the time of Adar? So first we're going to see Rav Tzadok says that, and this is something that Rav Tzadok spends a lot of time doing, that there's a systematicity to the way in which HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world. There's alignment of ideas. We don't live with various streams of consciousness, but rather all streams of consciousness are reflective of one another. So instead of thinking that I'm a person who lives in the conflict of time and the constriction of space, where all of those three avenues are more and more concealment, each one separate from the other, the Sefer Yetzirah and Panimius HaTorah teaches us to see all of those three elements of time, self, and space, not as separation, but as part of a singular unity, referred to as Ashan, the pillar of smoke that followed Klal Yisrael out of Mitzrayim on their way towards Eretz Yisrael. That Ashan is Ayin, which is Olam, which is the spatial coordinates and the spatial orientation towards Hashem's revelation. The Shin in Ashan is Shana, which is the temporal coordinates of the calendar year, where each and every time period represents a different orientation, which aligns with a specific spatial coordinate. Every time has its place, every place has its time. And Nefesh, which is the Nun of Ashan, which is self. So instead of seeing myself in a space of constriction of time and space, which is the birth of all constriction, Panimius HaTorah teaches me how to take all of these differentiated elements and unify them together. So it's kulo ka'ashan tichla, that all of the negativity, all of the constriction will be negated like smoke. When I recognize the ashan of all things, when I can connect to the fact that Hashem is revealing himself by way of time, space, and self, so then I undo all concealment and I'm able to receive the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in that place. So first Rav Tzadok is going to explain to us what the month of Adar means and what it's associated with, the person that it's associated with, and the quality that it's associated with. And then we're going to see how Adar is not something that takes place alone. Purim is not something that takes place alone. In fact, there are two stages towards every redemption. There's the Purim stage of redemption, and there's the Pesach stage of redemption. There's the Adar that's associated with Purim, that's the beginning of the rectification. And then there's going to be the Pesach, which is the Nisan, which is the actual redemption itself. And these two stages, says Rav Tzadok, are going to be fundamentally necessary when it comes to our understanding of our relationship with the Koyach HaMedama. That we need to elevate the Koyach HaMedama. We need to bring it away from the guf. We need to detox it off of its physical addictive tendencies and cravings and allow it to slowly but surely find its joy and its sustenance within Limud HaTorah, within Kriyat Shema, within the contemplation of divine unity, within the best thoughts that we can think about ourselves and about other people and about the world, finding the Nakuda Tova, which is the hand that has the ability to redeem imagination from the body and bring it back to a place of prophecy, as Rabbi Nachman explains. And there's going to be a two-stage process in that. There's the beginning of the rectification, which is associated with Adar, where I'm doing the work of clarifying the Medame and bringing it up. It's still susceptible to the failures of the body. I can't trust my Medame yet. I haven't been mezachich it. But the work of Adar and the work of Purim is getting to the place where I come to realize that, wait a second, my Dimyon, my imagination, is not the enemy of spirituality, but rather the vehicle through which I'm going to reveal more and more spirituality. And the secret is that once we go through the Purim stage and the other stage, which is the Hakdama and our effort to elevate the Dimyon, what comes afterwards is a gift that comes as the result of our efforts. It's not the result of the work that I've done, but once we put in the effort, HaKadosh Baruch Hu sends down a gift, which is that after I do the work of trying to clarify my imagination, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to send me the gift of refined imagination, which is the redemption of Pesach, which is the freedom to see the world with eyes of Emunah. And so Purim and Pesach, which is two forms of Geula, as Rashi says, that Pesach and Purim are fundamentally connected together because it's Soimich Geula leGeula. That Geula of Purim has to be associated with the Geula of Pesach because they're two stages of the same process. And we know what Rabbi Nachman says, that it used to be that all beginnings began from Pesach itself, but now, Rabbi Nassan explains, but now it starts from Purim. So we see that if we can understand the role of the rectification of the imagination associated with Adar and Purim, then we can also understand the gift of redemption that arrives after we do the work of rectifying our imagination, which is the secret of Nisan and Pesach. And so we're going to see that the work is to abstract and elevate our imagination from its physical attachments, to bring it back up, to allow itself to engarb the mind. And once the Dimyon engarbs the mind, then it has this capacity to reveal what we saw last week, which is that by Yosef and Yaakov, that all of the Dimyon is fundamentally connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That even when I feel I'm disconnected, even when I feel I'm all over the place, there is an innermost kernel of the illumination of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's light, which shows me that I am always with him. He is always with me, no matter what. No matter how far the Madama seems to take a person, there's always a very simple shift back into that place of Kodesh HaKadoshim. When I strengthen my mind, when I'm Yargiz the Yetzer HaTov on the Yetzer Hara, when I learn Torah, when I say Kriyat Shema, when I remember the day of death, all of these tools are the very simple techniques that we have to re-spark our imagination and to come to find that Hashem, you're with me in the Seichel and you're with me in the Dimyon. You're with me in my godly soul and you're with me in my animal soul. You're with me in my ability to know information and you're with me in my ability to imagine the meaning of that information. Ultimately, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to feel good in this world. And to feel good in this world is to be able to live with the deep narrative of faith. And sometimes it's only biyad hanaviyah medama that we can only uncover that deep narrative of faith through the utilization of imagination. And so we're going to see how these two stages of the rectification of the imagination, the Purim stage and the Pesach stage, Adar and Nisan, we're going to see how this brings us into a place of rectification. One last introduction before we go into the words of Rav Tzadok himself, that these 2 months, Adar and Nisan, Purim and Pesach, are associated with particular letters. Each and every month has its own orientation point based on the Sefer Yetzirah, and it corresponds to a particular tzaddik, and it corresponds to a particular modality of experience in this world, and it also corresponds to a particular letter. The Sefer Yetzirah is going to point out to us that Adar is the letter Kuf. Nisan is the letter Hey. And when we look at these 2 letters, we recognize very quickly that the Kuf is the Hey, except the line is extended downwards into a lower place. And the relationship between the kuf and the hey is exactly what we're going to be describing. That the kuf is the ability to go down to the body, to elevate imagination back up to the mind, to descend down into those places of concealment, of that sense that I've lost my mind, but I can retrieve my imagination. That's the kuf. That's Purim. It goes down, lamata me'asar tvachim, down into places of seemingly difficult things, but in order to reveal a deep light. And then once we redeem our imagination in the right way, HaKadosh Baruch Hu sends us a gift of Ruach HaKodesh and Nevuah, which is revealed in the Os Hey, which is where we come to identify ourselves as the Shechina itself, that the Shechina is the heart of each and every Yid. And so the Kuf and the Hey represents this process of first trying to rectify imagination and abstract it back up to the mind, away from the body. And then once we do that effort properly, there's a Geula of the mind that comes about, which is where we realize that in truth, we're not a Kuf, we're a Hey. Because what's the Os Kuf? A Kuf is a kof, it's an ape, it's a monkey. And monkey see, monkey do. The monkey, the ape, is always representative of this mimicry, this imitation, the imitative quality of wanting to pretend that I'm like something, even though I'm not that thing. The act of pretending, where a monkey is able to witness what's taking place and mimic those things, on the one hand, is totally inauthentic, not good enough. It's not ideal. I don't want to be like a monkey who's just aping things and pretending that I know what I'm doing when in truth I'm engaged in monkey business. But at the same point, Chazal in the Zohar Kodesh have revealed to us that even though the relationship between authenticity and this ape-like mimicry is typically one where to be like a monkey is not a good thing, on Purim, the job is to become like a monkey. The job is to become without das. The job is to become someone who just imitates. I imitate holiness. That's what I do. I see holiness and I imitate holiness. I see Kedusha and I imitate Kedusha. And that's where the kofiyut, the Kedusha, this holy mimicry, this holy ape-like quality where we're just monkeys in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's that we're mimicking the Shekhinah. We're becoming monkeys for you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because all we're trying to do is to imitate you. We don't know what Emunah is, but we're trying to pretend that we know what Emunah is. We're mimicking Emunah. We're mimicking the mitzvos that we do, because Kedushasi l'malam mikdusha seichem, in the end of the day, nothing is authentic. Everything, when seen against the true essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's light, is going to be revealed to have just been an imagined assumption. But instead of seeing that recognition of imagination and that I'm still a kof, I'm still just a monkey in the face of the real thing, instead of letting that make me feel inauthentic and allowing it to drag me down to klipa, which starts with a kuf, I accept that fact that yes, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I'm a kof b'fnei Shechina. I'm a monkey in the face of the Shechina. And in that place, the kuf stops dragging me down into klipa, which is the descent of the imagination into addiction, and it enables me to elevate myself back up to Kedusha, which is the mindfulness of Chachma itself. And with that being said, we'll go into the words of Rav Tzadok himself in Ostalid, B'Shem Hashem Na'aseh V'Natzliach. Zok the Heilige Kohen. Chodesh Adar nireh shehi mesugal yoter lehiskaber bo al koach hadimyon. It appears to me that it's the month of Adar, which has a far more open quality of elevating and rectifying the imagination. Because we know that the 12 months correspond to the 12 Shvatim. And each and every shevet, each and every element of Klal Yisrael has its own specific strength and its own specific purpose that it's there to carry out, and its own way of being unified with the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and its own way of engraving its quality within the body of Klal Yisrael. That even though all of the Shvatim are part and parcel of Shivtei, the body of Klal Yisrael, nevertheless, each shevet has its own particular strength, and Rav Tzadok explains elsewhere in Rasisei Laila that each shevet also has its own particular deficiency, which has to be the site in which we uncover our strength. And even though all of Bnei Yisrael are one holy nation in one land, and we're literally unified, and that each and every shevet contains all of the other shvatim, and each and every yid contains each and every other yid, nevertheless, each and every particular expression of Nishmas Yisrael has its own unique quality. And we already know that in each and everything in this world, there are three elements. There's the world itself, the spatial coordinates, there's the temporal coordinates of Shana, and there's the psychological coordinates of self, right? Kohen Gadol, Yom Kippur, Kodesh HaKadoshim. All three elements being unified. And we know that there are many, many different ways of taking the 12 Shvatim, the 12 identity markers of what it means to be a Yid, 12 kochos, that are available to each and every Yid. There's a way of aligning those kochos, those shvatim, to the months. There's not only one way to do it. B'nai Yissaschar has one way, the Sefer Yetzirah has different ways, there's different intonations in the Zohar HaKadosh and Chazals, but Rav Tzadok says, even though there are many ways in which they can be aligned, nevertheless, they're all true. The general breakdown of Nishmas Yisrael is that it breaks down into 12 tribes. And these 12 tribes correspond to the 12 coordinates of space, which are referred to as the 12 Gevulei Al-Kason, the 12 forms in which space takes place, which is described in the Sefer Yetzirah. And the year itself is broken up into 12 months. So we have 12 in space, 12 in time, and 12 in soul. And the way in which the months align to the souls of the Shvatim have many different orientations, many ways of arranging them. And each and every one of them represents something very deep and very great, and each one has its own secret and its own truth. And that's not what we're going to be focusing on right now. What we're going to focus on right now, says Rav Tzadok, is the simple path of understanding, which is something I also saw in the book of the Heilige Kedushas Levi, says Rav Tzadok, that Chodesh Adar is oriented towards the celestial sign of Dagim, of fish, something that is concealed beneath the sea, because it corresponds to Yosef HaTzadik. Yosef HaTzadik is the hero of Adar, according to the arrangement that we're going to be looking at. And how do we know? That the bracha of Yosef HaTzadik was v'yigdu larov b'karev haaretz, that you should be fruitful and multiply like the fish. And that's why Adar has the celestial sign of fish. And we also know that there's times where Adar splits into 2 months. Sometimes there's only one Adar, sometimes there's an Adar Rishon and an Adar Sheni. And says Rav Tzadok, this works well because we have Shevet Yosef, and sometimes Shevet Yosef is going to expand itself into another type of Shevet, which is Shevet Ephraim. Not always, sometimes it will be called Yosef, sometimes they'll also be Ephraim. So we see that Adar, which could sometimes be 2, is not always 2, and associated with fish, is directly connected to Yosef HaTzadik, who can also sometimes be associated as 2, and is also associated with fish. Rav Tzadok continues, and he says, this element of Ephraim, you'll tell me that only Yosef is associated with fish, but the truth of the matter is that Ephraim is also associated with fish, and Ephraim comes from a language of Purim also, that he's referred to as ki hefreini v'goymer, ki bo koach hapirya v'rivya, ki berchasam v'yigdu larov b'karev haaretz, which is the chodesh of Adar. That Ephraim also represents this fruitful quality of expansivity and growth. And so we see that the chodesh of Adar corresponds to Yosef HaTzadik. And there's numerous places in Chazal we see that Adar has this unique capacity of exponential growth, of planting in Adar, of multiplicity in Adar, that the sheep that's sown become pregnant in Adar. And we see in numerous places that Bnei Yisrael are associated with the sheep. There's a certain pregnancy that takes place for Klal Yisrael, for Nishmos Yisrael in the month of Adar, which is the excitement over Purim, Be'ezras Hashem. Adar is also from a language of Adir Bamarom Hashem, strength, intensity, a rootedness. It represents strength and power. And the essential nature of power is when we have the ability of overcoming our Yetzer Hara, which is our imagination, which becomes attached to the body. So it's all coming out clear that ultimately, because Chodesh Adar is a time of strength associated with Yosef HaTzadik, the strength is going to be used in order to extricate our imagination from its physical dependency on the body and to bring it back up to a place where we can be shoichet the Yetzer Hara and reveal the goodness within it, which is its ability to uncover more and more light. Pasuk says, Ki chen yevurach gever yireh Hashem, that the truest sense of gevura is the ability to have yireh Shemayim, to extricate the imagination back up and to imagine HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the world. The gevura of individuals. This is the strength of Yosef HaTzadik, vayima'ein. Yosef HaTzadik's ability to overcome the nisyonos of Eshes Potifar are rooted in a gevura elyona, a deep and profound level of gevura that knows one thing and one thing alone, which is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is everywhere, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is everything, and ein od milvado. And mitzad ha'elyon, from that koach, a person has the ability of overcoming anything. That's the month of Adar, and that's the month of Yosef. Nisan, which comes after Adar, doesn't correspond to Yosef, but rather corresponds to Yehuda, because that's the Rosh Hashanah for the Malachim. So we see that we're encountering what we saw in this week's Parsha as well. In Vayechi, in Vayigash, and Miketz, the stories of Yosef and Yehuda, that there's a unique relationship and a bond between Yosef and Yehuda, between Mashiach ben Yosef and between Mashiach ben David, which is from the Shevet of Yehuda. That Yosef is the beginning and Yehuda is the end. Yosef is the light of the Yesod, which is the light of Adar, which is Piri Verivia, which is the ability to overcome my imagination's stuckness within sexual fantasy and all sorts of fantasies of anxiety and worry and all of the different attachments to this world. And then Yehuda is going to be the redemption, where Malchus is going to be uncovered. Zok the Heilige Rebbe, he says that now these 2 months, and this is in Os Beis now, from within Os Daled, these 2 months correspond to 2 different letters. They correspond to the Kuf, which is Adar, and they correspond to the Hey, which is Nisan. That Adar, which is the beginning of the rectification of the imagination, has an orientation towards this letter, which can be considered good or bad, the Kuf. And Nisan has a relationship with a profoundly potent letter, which is Hey, what we saw in last week's Parsha, Halachem Zara. Halachem Zara, that the Hey has the ability of bringing down all of the light imaginable. It's Hashras Hashchina. And so Tzadok now goes into the Zohar HaKadosh and the Sefer Yetzirah to teach us about these 2 letters. What is the relationship between Kuf and Hey? Which is also going to teach us what the relationship between Yosef and Yehuda is, which is also going to teach us the relationship between Purim and Pesach, Adar and Nisan, the beginning of the process and the culmination of the process. Zok the Heiliger of Tzadok, that the Zohar HaKadosh teaches us that the Kuf is in the secret of Eishes Zinunim, and the Hey is in the secret of Eishes Chayil. And that the notion of Eishes Zinunim is Kegavna de Kufa de Azil Basar Barnash, like a monkey that follows and imitates human beings. So at first glance, the Os Kuf is representing something called Eishes Zinunim. Eishes Zinunim is sexual fantasy. Sexuality has nothing to do necessarily with sexual desire. Sexuality and the bonds of connectivity and the attachment that is at the core of any attempt to connect to someone else becomes the main site in which fantasy develops. It's all rooted, all of the psychoanalytic kind of attempts to understand the nature of imagination and the drives of a person, kuli alma lo pligi, everybody agrees that it goes down to the core of the basic orientation towards attachments. And that expresses itself by way of sexual desire, sexual fantasy, the birur that is necessary, the clarification that is necessary for the Yetzer HaTov to uncover the light of the Medama and not to allow it to get stuck in that place of the imagined light and pleasure that will come about from broken and fallen things. So the Os Kuf at the beginning, the external nature of imagination, first and foremost expresses itself as Eishes Zinunim, what the Arizal hints to when he talks about Chava Rishona, the first mate of Chava that the Arizal brings down also in Shar Kavanos by Pesach, which is the entire rectification of speech and the clarification of imagination, is that first and foremost, the first mate that Adam Harishon had was Chava Rishona, which represents the quality of imagination gone wild, of imagination trying to root itself in the physical pleasures of this worldliness in the attempts to find meaning in this worldly attachment, which expresses itself by way of Lilith and Lamed Yud Taf, all of these destructive elements of sexual fantasy and nocturnal dreams and all of the ruminations about the hopes that I'll find pleasure here, there. That is the first thing that Adam Arishon was meant to grapple with. Because to redeem that drive, to redeem that nefesh habahamis, which seeks pleasure, and to elevate it back upwards and to experience pleasure from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that's the ikar tachlis of being a human being in this world. To transform the darkness of the Yetzer Hara into the light of the Yetzer HaTov. Not to undo the Yetzer Hara, like Chazal tell us that if we were to undo the Yetzer Hara, there would be no more Piri Verivia, there would be no more multiplicity in the world, the drive would be taken away, but rather to elevate the drive, to bring the drive back to a place of Kedusha, to uncover the secret of Yichud Ha'amiti, and to bond one's mind with HaKadosh Baruch Hu and to understand the yichud of Ze'er Anpin and Shchinte. And so at first glance, imagination is this orientation of Eishes Zinunim. And it's only afterwards that Adam Arishon receives the true Chava, which is the second Chava, which is the secret of Eishes Chayil. Eishes Chayil Ateres Baila. The rectification of this quality of Malchus, the rectification of the Isha, a true helping mate in this world, the Yetzer HaTov in its refinement in the greatest way imaginable. So when it comes to the processing of imagination, first and foremost, it's the wild, transgressive space of imagined fantasies and projections and introjections, which is associated with Eishes Zinunim. And in its rectified state, it's going to be Eishes Chayil, which is the ability to utilize imagination in the right way. And this lower quality of imagination associated with the oskuf, which is adar, at first glance, when it's in its wild nature, and it's the element of eshes zinunim, so it's like a monkey that's just imitating human beings. And in that sense, this mimicry, this ape-like nature of imitation is seen as a symptomatic thing because we're just inauthentic and stuck in the body. But, says the Heiliger of Tzadok, there's also another way of looking at the kuf. There's also another way of looking at the imagination and the rectification of imagination from within that stuck place, which is the secret of what the Gemara says in Bava Basra, is that every person, every Jew in the face of the Shekhinah is like a monkey in front of a person, which means that we're also like monkeys by the Shekhinah. That yes, sometimes when we're stuck in our Yetzer Hara, we're like monkeys in front of a person. But even in our Yetzer HaTov, when our Yetzer HaTov is activated and we're functioning well, we're still like monkeys because we still don't know anything. But we're like monkeys in front of the Shekhinah. We're trying to imitate Kedusha now. We're no longer stuck in the kuf of Klipa, but we're bringing it back up to the kuf of Kedusha. And so the goal is not to undo the kofiyut, to get rid of that ape-like nature and that monkey business, but rather to transform it into being like a monkey that's trying to imitate the Shekhinah HaKadoshah. Because the Oshei hints to the Shekhinah. The Oshei is the rectification of the heart of the Jewish soul that has the ability of realizing that all of my chalomos and all of my dimyonos are in truth fundamentally healthy and holy and rooted in the desire to connect myself to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The kuf is the kupa de azil basar barnash lehistamos lebechol davar. But in its preliminary stage of unrefinement, it's not yet a hay, it's a kuf. And the leg has extended down the number line, and it's in the territory of concealment. And in that place, imagination is still unbridled, and it has the tendency to ruminate and become addicted. But our job is to rectify it. What's our job to do? Our job is to try and become like a monkey in the face of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Because a human being was created b'tzalmenu u'kedemusenu. The tselem and the dmus, the capacity of meaning making by way of intellect, and the active imagination that has the ability of transforming sensual experience, what I see, what I feel, what I touch, what I smell, and what my body encounters. And instead of letting that draw me down to the ground, I transform the dmus to allow the tselem to shine even brighter. That's the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has created us with bechira and the ability to refine the imagination. Meaning to say, it's all b'derech dimyon, like a monkey. That kitsalmenu kidmusenu, that adam comes from a language of imagination. And so the entire orientation of the spiritual self is also imitative. And it's also just mimicry, and it's also imagination. This all stems from the potency and the strength of imagination that rests within the adam, that extends downwards all the way to the external territories of this world. And when our imagination gets stuck in the territories of this world, the entire shape of the Eshes Zinunim takes place. This Chava Rishona, this place of unbridled imagination that's rooted in sexual fantasies of all sorts, which is any type of fantasy. Anxiety is also a fantasy. Sadness is also a fantasy of sorts that are all attached to the same nucleus. And so when imagination descends down like the kof, it can become concealed and congealed. What is this element of Eshes Zinunim? What does Eshes Zinunim mean? It means Hashikua b'dimyonos shel chemdos olam hazeh. It means the addiction and the stuckness within the imaginings and the fantasies of this worldly pleasures, which is when the imagination attaches itself to the body. All of this, that which is taking place down below, is all reflected in the upper worlds as well. That there's the world of Atzilus, there's the world of purified revelation, and then there's the worlds of Bri, Yitzir, and Asiya. And I just saw 2 weeks ago that the Alter Rebbe writes in one of his Ma'amarim that the worlds of Bri, Yitzir, and Asiya, the lower worlds, are like a Dimyon be'erech, the emes of the world of Atzilus. So this same process of imagination descending down into concealment, ultimately for the sake of refining it and bringing it back up to allow it to reveal the innermost light with more potency and more light, it's taking place above in the higher worlds, and it's taking place within our own lives on a regular basis, and it all centers around this quality of imagination and Dimyon. Because for an individual who's attached to the goodness of the soul, to the tov that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given them in this world, and they're able to look at this world, the problem is not this world. The problem is not the goodness of this world. It's getting stuck within the illusory fantasies that this world has the ability to provide us with what we need. that in truth, this world, if HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us light in this world and goodness in this world, then a refined person has the ability of taking everything in this world and transforming it into a place of Avodas Hashem. There's absolutely nothing in this world that is created without a purpose and that can't be utilized. And each and everything that's created is there to reveal the glory of God that comes from it, because everything was created to reveal the glory of God. But that's only after we relinquish the attachment that our imagination has to the body, because in that place, then we're just stuck in physical pleasure and we're only seeking out the satisfaction that the mind will feel in that fleeting moment of dopamine secretion, which makes a person feel like a god for a second in any type of pleasure desire, in any type of gratification. Once we overcome that all too human tendency of getting stuck in the lower parts of Dimyon, and we climb back out and we bring it back into a place of Kedusha where we can reveal the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so then we have the ability of transforming the light of everything in this world. So when we're able to elevate ourselves up away from the addictive imagination, then we have the ability of revealing the kavod and the glory of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in everything we encounter. And we can acknowledge and be grateful to HaKadosh Baruch Hu for everything that he's created. And through this refinement, what happens is that we can draw all of our imaginations towards holiness. This is the avodah of Adar, to rectify the imaginative attachments that we have. And instead of seeking out the addictive momentary pleasure that's going to give us a sense of well-being and perfection, to overcome that desire and to enter into a place of the pleasure of faith. That's when imagination returns back to the light of rectification. This is still in Adar. This is still the refinement of the monkiness. And somebody who's attached in truth to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in the secret of Va'atem Hadveikim Hashem Elokeichem Chaim Kulchem Hayom. What's Chaim Kulchem Hayom? What's Kedusha? It's Chachma. Someone who has utilized their mind enough to ensure that the Chachma is the captain of the ship, and that we haven't allowed the ceiling to sag out of our laziness, and we've established what's what and who's the host of the house, which is the koyach of Chachma that has the ability to express itself within the heart. If a person is operating in that place of Chachma, which is spoken about the entirety of Klal Yisrael, that's the basic status of Klal Yisrael, because we're the essential quality of the Shekhinah. So then we have the ability of elevating all of this worldliness by way of our imagination back up to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What does it mean that we're the Shekhinah, says Rav Tzadok? It means that at the innermost core of the Jewish soul is an aspect of HaKadosh Baruch Hu from above, a chelek Eloi kai mima'al. And that piece of HaKadosh Baruch Hu Kavyachol, who's indivisible, but nevertheless there can be a partial expression of it without ruining that indivisibility of it. It's not simply something that comes down from a high place and through a process of cause and effect it finally settles within us. No, it's directly from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Man de nafach mitocho nafach u'ma'atzmiuso. That the light of our hearts, the innermost point of the meaning making, the vehicle of imagination and its refinement, is the heart of Klal Yisrael, and that comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu Kavyachol. Mitochei nafach, Hashem breathes life into us from within himself, so to speak, which is the strength of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that rests itself in the lower worlds. That's the Shekhinah, that's the heart of Klal Yisrael. Which means that we have the ability to redeem ourselves, a full redemption from all of the stuckness and the addictive tendencies of imagination down here, to the degree that we can become free from the Yetzer Hara. We've undone and detoxed ourselves from those fantasies of trying to wrestle a certain amount of pleasure or presence or wholeness from this world, and we accept our imperfection and we serve Hashem with faith. This full redemption, this full rectification of the imagination where we're free from the Yetzer Hara, that's Nisan. That's the hay of Nisan. That's the light of eating matzah instead of chametz, of eating faith. We're no longer stuck within the relationship of the Yetzer Hara, which is the Sha'or Shebe'isa, which is chametz itself. Nisan is the redemption from the Yetzer Hara itself, but Adar is the process of the redemption itself, which is abstracting and elevating our imagination back up to the place that it needs to go to. And on Pesach, the Oshei, the freedom from the Yetzer Hara that comes about through the effort of transforming the imagination, that happens suddenly. And suddenly we're freed from the koyach Dimyon. Suddenly we're freed from the addiction to this world and from the profound stuckness that each and every one of us felt in the profound darkness of this world. And we go from a darkness into a profound light, to the degree that even the lowly maidservant was able to perceive prophecy that Yecheskel was incapable of receiving, because the Koyach HaMedama was refined to such a degree that Nevuah was revealed for everybody. And what this does for us, what is the ultimate purpose of the rectification of imagination? It's the nevuah. And what is nevuah? Nevuah is to come to the place of absolute cleavage to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, dveikus hagamur b'Hashem Yisparach, which is what? Which is hasagas ha'emes la'amiso b'lishum dimyon klal in the secret of the hay. It's where we're able to allow imagination not to be the engine of our meaning, but the garment in which our meaning is able to take on new shapes and contours. The emes la'amiso that the Avos HaKadoshim wanted, which is the pure awareness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence, not the attempt to retrieve the faith in HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence in a world of concealment, but the emes la'amiso, the ability for me to recognize ein oin mulvado, kipshuto mashmo, when I abstract myself away from my Yetzer Hara and I tap into that place, so then imagination is no longer busy making meaning and it's all addictive tendencies. Every addiction is rooted in the fact that the ultimate meaning is going to be found in the utilization and the usage of that substance or that behavior that's going to be the center of my world. That's addiction. But the rectification of addiction, the rectification of the addictive imagination, which imagines the body to be more perfect than it can actually be, is a restoration of the true kernel of existence for ourselves, which is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you're everything. And then the Dimyon becomes a lavush, and the Dimyon becomes this thing that enables me to bring out more holiness. Why does there need to be a remnant of the Dimyon? Why do we need to focus on the celebration of Adar, which is just the rectification of imagination, if the purpose is to get to the place of the hay of Nisan, which is the emes la'amiso b'li dimyon klal, and the secret of the hay? Why do I need to continue to be a monkey in the face of the Shechina? So here's where Rav Tzadok is going to explain it. He says the kof, the monkey, imitates the individual, just as the individual imitates HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What does this imitative quality mean, this imaginative quality? It's what rests within a person's ability in this world in terms of their spiritual work, what I'm able to do, the work that I'm able to do, the clarifications that I can do, clarifying my Yetzer Hara, understanding my triggers, understanding the craving patterns, learning to extricate myself from the Yetzer Hara. That's what's within a person's ability to do. That's their hishtadlus in this world. That's where I'm like a monkey in the face of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, trying without knowing what I'm doing, attempting without knowing. But at this point, this imaginative and mimicry of holiness is no longer the kuf of klipa. It's no longer getting me stuck in Eshes Zinunim. It's rather preparing me to enter into a place of Eshes Chayil. And this is when the kuf begins to stand for kadosh and holiness, where the imagination itself becomes a handmaid into the chachma of kedusha. As it says in Maseches Shabbos, that the kuf represents kedusha. And the secret of kedusha, what's holiness? It's the imitations and the imaginings of a person being connected to on high. Kedusha is masha ha'adam mizdame le'elyon. When I imagine myself as being similar to the levels above me, being similar to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Like the pasuk says, v'hikti dashtem, that you should be holy. Ki kadosh ani, because I'm holy. And what's the secret here? It's that, you think you could be as holy as me, says Hashem? No, kedushasi l'malim kedushaseichem. The dimyon always has to remain, because you're never going to be able to become that fundamental kuf of kedusha, because the only fundamental kuf of kedusha, where there's no kedusha higher than it, is the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu kavyachol. But the avodah of the kuf and the dimyon, the kedusha, is to perpetually remember that we're imperfect. And that happens when we remember that we're just pretending in the face of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that it's all a schoik ba'alma. The entire existence is a schoik ba'alma. It's a joke vis-a-vis the real reality of what existence is. So that's the kuf, the need to bring out through every ounce of our effort, breaking down our addictive tendencies and our cravenous thoughts to whatever anxious ruminations we're stuck in, because they provide us with some semblance of comfort, because at least my mind is busy with something, or from the temptations of physical pleasure, whether it be through food or gashmias or sexual drives, and to overcome all of the negative tendencies. That's our responsibility in this world. And then once a person has done what they need to do, and we've prepared ourselves in the light of Adar, in the light of Purim, and we've opened ourselves up to have truly done the work that we needed to do, then comes along the hay. The hay is Nisan. The hay is the refinement of emes la'amiso. The hay is the secret of siyata d'shmaya, that it's the help that comes from above, not the help that is emergent from below, back up above, which is the work that I'm doing, but rather it's the light that comes from above down below, the help that comes from Shemayim. Because we know Chazal have told us that a person just has to rectify themselves and sanctify themselves down here just a little bit, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to draw down a profound level and dosage of refinement and holiness from above. That Adar is the preparation of doing the work, and Nisan is the gift that comes afterwards. That in the beginning it's work, and in the end it's a gift. Because the truth of the matter is, the illumination of Emes La'amiso and the full clarity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu being in this world, it's impossible to come to that place without the help from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And even the rectification of our imaginations to the degree that we're able to do that, that also doesn't happen without HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Because holiness is the boundaries that we set up for ourselves in areas of fantasy and this imagined pleasure, which is all of the dimyonos of the Yetzer Hara. To be totally clean, to be nakila gamre. And the only way that a person can actually have protection is through HaKadosh Baruch Hu's help. HaKadosh Baruch Hu sends down the light to enable us to free ourselves from the Yetzer Hara and to transform it into the Yetzer HaTov. But nevertheless, even though the completion is only through the hands of Hashem, a person is responsible to begin the work, just a little bit of work, a modicum of effort that we have to reveal, like a pinhole, kechuda shal mechet. But, says Rav Tzadok, even though all we need is to poke a pinhole of effort in to rectify the imagination away from the addictions of the body and to bring it back up to a place of faith for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to finish the job. But it's not enough to just make a pinhole. The pinhole has to mamish be clear from one side to the other. Nekev mefulash me'avar al avar. A person can't offer a half measure in trying to fix themselves. If we're trying to let go of our triggers and cravings, then we have to let go of our triggers and cravings. We have to descend down into the depth of the heart to want to serve Hashem, not just on the externalities of the heart, but the depth of the heart. That's the place that we have to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu from, and that's where the heavenly help is going to come from. The beginning of the effort that a person has to put in this world, says Rav Tzadok, is the attempt to be holy. That's the letter Kuf. That means that I have a desire to imitate and to imagine myself to be connected and alike to the Adam Ha'elyon, which is the illumination of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the light of the Tzadikim Ha'amitim, the light of Shefa. That's the entire root of our effort that a person is responsible for in this world. The desire that we have to imitate HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the desire that we have to imagine ourselves as being close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, meaning to say to attach ourselves to his qualities and to rectify and sanctify ourselves with holiness, which is the desire and the yearning power of the Yetzer HaTov to have more and more faith, connect more and more to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And this is why the Adam is referred to as Adam, because Adam comes from a language of Adam Elyon, that I will imagine myself and I will mimic and I will pretend to be like that which is above me, which is the work of holiness. And this is the entire purpose of the creation of the human being, just to rectify the imagination. But as a result of becoming aware of good and bad, which took place through the Chet of the Yetz Hadas, which was the descent of imagination down into the felt experience of the body, the negative drive, the Yetzer Hara, and the desire to imagine ourselves by way of satisfying and fulfilling our fantasies and our physical pleasures, and the yearning only to take care of myself, that's all the negativity. That's the Eishes Zununim, that's the breakdown of imagination. Not to live with bittul, not to live with the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's unity, not to be aware that imagination is the engine that drives emunah. By way of bittul, when I'm attached to my chachma. If imagination is only attached to bina, so then it becomes the imaginative attempt to satisfy the all too human drives. And this is the beginning. The Nachash comes and he promises us, what's the breakdown of imagination? We saw this already, that you can be like God, you could be perfect. And the only way to be perfect like God is to experience a perfect pleasure, which lends the person on this addictive chase of always chasing the dragon and trying to imagine that the next time I use this substance, it's going to be perfect. The next time I get angry, it's going to fix everything. This imagined perfectibility of the self is the roots of all of the Yetzer Hara, when in truth, the thing that we have to do is abstract imagination from the known body back up to the unknown soul and realize that Kedushasi l'malu mikdusha sechem. The Nachash comes and it tells us that we can be like God, which gets us stuck in all of the physical nature of the body. And it seduces us to believe that we can imagine a state of perfection. And it doesn't cause us to negate ourselves and to be included within our source, which is the secret of bittul and chachma, but we extend ourselves downwards and we get stuck in our own most ego-driven fantasies, where we become separate and we become our own territory, our own domain of our own godly nature, God forbid. This is Avodah Zarah Gemura. This is where we become Avodah Zarah, as Rav Tzadok has made very clear to us. And the entire Torah, all of the eitzos of the Torah, all of the recommendations in the Torah, are giving us the ability to transform the imaginations of the Yetzer Hara and the physical fantasies and abstract them back up to a place of holiness. That is the avodah, to rectify the imagination. And this is the secret of Chodesh Adar, the month in which the difficulty was transformed. Asher nahapachu. This is the entire inyan of the strength and the gevura of the individual has the ability to overcome their Yetzer Hara by way of trying to be mitkadesh, to make myself holy, to live by way of bittul and chachma, and to imagine myself as being someone who the only thing that I want to do is reveal HaKadosh Baruch Hu's light in this world. To the degree that I'm able to transform all of my imagination and all of my human tendency to be madama milsa lemilsa, and transform it away from all of the chemdos and the desires of the body, and bring them back up to holiness. That's the redemption of Adar, says Rav Tzadok. That's the redemption of Purim, which is the redemption of the imagination, because the redemption of Purim is not like the full redemption of Nisan. It's not when HaKadosh Baruch Hu sends down the Shefa after the effort. It's still where we're in the effort, because we were still slaves of Achashverosh. We were still caught up within the confines of the imagination. But what happens in the month of Adar and in Purim is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has showed us that even though we're stuck, he still hasn't left us. And even though we've become addicted, he still has not departed. And that HaKadosh Baruch Hu rests with us within our impurity. And that even though we're stuck in the imaginings of this worldliness, and we're stuck within all of the concealment of this world where we're nehene from the Suda of Achashverosh, nevertheless, we're not far from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And even though we haven't yet merited the full redemption, to be free from the Yetzer Hara entirely, to the degree that all of my imagination and all of my dreams are also going to be the site in which I attach myself to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, just as I do in my Seichel, to the degree that even my dreams, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to be standing there right in front of me, like Yaakov and his children are going to merit in the future. Like the pasuk says that the young children, the boys and the girls, are going to have dreams of prophecy. That's the lot of Klal Yisrael, where we're going to be free from the Yetzer Hara, where all of our imaginations are going to be revealed to be like the imaginings of the Nevi'im, Biad HaNevi'im Adama, which means that they're fundamentally rooted in a profound and absolute connectivity to God, so to speak. Nowadays, in the time of Purim, in the time of Adar, it's impossible for a person to merit this in entirety. A person cannot fundamentally maintain this sense. What's the chait of the tzaddikim? The descent down for a moment into the imaginations of the worlds of separation for the sake of ascending back up to Atzilus. But in the end of the day, there's always a necessary dip, because we're not yet at the true Nisan, we're not yet at the true redemption. But nevertheless, even within the stuckness, each and every person who has the desire to can begin to sanctify themselves. And Habalatayr, someone who comes to purify themselves, is going to merit the beginning of the redemption, which is the gate in which the tzaddikim come to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Shavisi Hashem L'negdi Tamid, the light of imagination, the light of Malchus, the work of Yosef HaTzadik, who was purified from all of his Dimyonos in Mitzrayim, which were the rectification of his dreams, the revelation that it was all L'Shem Shemayim, that the entire reason he wanted to be king and to have control over anything was only for the sake of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to draw down Shefa and Parnasa through his hands. That he understood that he was a tzinor of Hashpa'ah. The tzaddik is mevatel themselves completely. They're a source of emunah. And he was able to transform all of the imaginings of this world into a place of Dimyon de Kedusha. That everything comes down by way of the Yesod. And he was the one who gave sustenance to the land. This is the gateway in which we enter into Kedusha. We enter into the gates of faith by way of the Yiras Hashem, that burns away all of our addictive imagined attachments and frees the imagination up enough to ascend upwards to the neshama, to become the levush, the garment of chachma, which is going to be the creativity and the ability for each and every one of us to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu with our own most goodness. This is what Yosef HaTzadik says to his brothers. The reason that I'm able to do this is because I'm fearful of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I'm not stuck within the Yetzer and the unbridled force of the imagination and its attachment to the fantastical body. And Yosef HaTzadik was clarifying to them that all of these things, all of these dimyonos that you thought I was stuck in, all of these reasons that you thought that you were meant to send me to the Ishmaelim, in truth, Yosef HaTzadik is saying all of it was an attempt to help you guys along to free yourself and to free your mind from the addictive tendencies of imagination. The three main center points is going to be kina, taiva, and kavod, honorifics, temptation, and jealousy. All we're going to see Rav Tzadok explain next week. But Yosef HaTzadik is going to reveal that my whole job was to rectify the imagination. And Be'ezras Hashem, it's a ganz year Purim. We're living in a time of Purim. We're in the years of Purim. We're in the Tkufa of Purim. We're entering into the Zman where Adar is coming into focus. And it's that place where our job is to undo the imagination's attachment down below by the body, not because it's bringing us to a bad place. Avad is bringing us to a bad place. But we can't undo our attachment with the imagination if we think that the imagination is a bad thing. What we have to do is that I want my imagination to be a vessel of faith and connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I want to have dreams like Yosef and like Yaakov. I want every part of my experience to be fundamentally saturated with the light of infinitude. And the only way I'm going to be able to retrieve that vessel of imagination is if I get it away from the places in which it's stuck, from the hishtakus ba'ilam haza, which is the addictive tendency of the fantastical imagination of stabilized perfection and pleasure, which is not available to us. Only Hashem is perfect. All we have is faith. Be'ezras Hashem, we'll enter into Purim and Moichin of Purim more and more. And we should be zoicha to continue with Rav Tzadok and all of the tzaddikim to learn how to rectify ourselves through the words of the tzaddikim, to rely upon the tzaddikim, and to come closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu be'ezras Hashem.